Hello, this week's Parsha is Sedra Ki Tietze. Many divide the mitzvot into two categories. Mitzvot that address man's relationship with God, ben adam u'makom, and mitzvot that address man's relationship with other people, ben adam u'chavero. Many of the mitzvot that address man's relationship with other people are aimed towards the vulnerable, but there are mitzvot that apply equally to the privileged and the weak. At the conclusion of this week's Torah portion, God commands us, "You shall not abuse a needy and destitute laborer, whether a fellow countryman or a stranger in one of the communities of your land." The abuse the prohibition refers to is withholding a day laborer's wages even past the end of the day. This is a repeat of the prohibition learned earlier in the Torah, where it stated, "You shall not defraud your fellow. You shall not commit robbery. The wages of a laborer shall not remain with you until the morning." In his commentary to the latter verse, Rashi wrote, "This refers to one who withholds the wages of a hired servant." In his commentary to the prohibition in our Torah portion, Rashi asked, "But hasn't this prohibition already been stated earlier, as we just saw?" Rashi explained, "It's repeated here to make one transgress in respect of the hired servant who is poor, i.e. if you wrong such a person, with violating two prohibitions. For the meaning of the text here is, you shall not suppress the wages of a hired servant who is poor and needy. As to the well-to-do hired servant, one has already been prohibited to wrong him. You shall not wrong your neighbor." Rashi explained that the prohibition of withholding wages applies both to the wealthy and to the poor. As Rashi quoted, the Talmud addressed the prohibition by adding the prohibition of theft to one who withholds wages from the day laborer. Follow the Gemara's discussion here. The sages said the prohibition against robbery is superfluous. But if the prohibition against robbery can be derived from the prohibitions against interest and exploitation, which was the Gemara's discussion before this, why do I need the prohibition written in the Torah with regard to robbery? The Gemara answers it's listed because that verse is not written to prohibit a standard case of robbery. Rather, it serves to prohibit the action of one who withholds the wages of a hired laborer. In that case, unlike the standard case of robbery, the employer does not take money from the laborer. He just merely fails to pay him his wages. That's robbery. The Gemara challenges, but with regard to one who withholds the wages of a hired laborer, it's explicitly written, "You shall not oppress a hired laborer who is poor and destitute." There's no need to derive this prohibition from the verse concerning robbery. That's the Gemara's challenge. And the Gemara answers the challenge by saying, it's written so that withholding the wages of a hired laborer always involves violating two prohibitions. It's easy to understand that when one withholds wages from a poor day laborer, they have violated laws that regulate a man's relationship with other people, even calling him a thief. It's harder to understand how this is an issue when withholding a wealthy person's wages. After all, they have money. Although the wealthy person might not feel the pain of delayed or missed wages, the prohibition stands because the employer is insensitive to his employees. The prohibition addresses the employer's insensitivity. Being sensitive to other people is the founding principle of laws addressing man's relationship with other people. But as well, an argument can be made that being insensitive isn't only an issue in relationship with others, but also weakens one's relationship with God, who commands us to be sensitive people. Shabbat Shalom.